Watauga Arts Council with your host, Cherry Johnson, serving arts in Watauga County for more than 30 years.
Hi, I'm Cherry Johnson with Watauga County Arts Council, and we have so many artists in our community of all descriptions. And if you happen to be around at our last Second Saturday celebration, you might have met a new artist to us, or a new author to us, I should say. This is Lory Whitehead, and we just met Lory because you came in to talk to us about your book and to get involved.
Correct.
Which is cool.
Yes, yes. I'm looking forward to volunteering there.
We are excited that you're interested in volunteer. We hope all of you will catch that bug and be part of the volunteer force at the Blue Ridge Art Space. Now, you wrote a book because of your life's experiences, I gather. Okay, talk to me about your background. Where are you from and how did you end up in the military?
Well, I was actually born in Wisconsin and grew up in Florida. Mm-hmm. And I was always attracted to law enforcement, but in those days, women were not able to get into that line of work very easily. So at one point, later on, when they did start accepting women in law enforcement, I was working as a parole officer in Miami, and my lifetime dream had been to go into the FBI. And I was talking to an FBI agent, and he said, well, what they really love is military experience. So at that point, I went into the Army and was commissioned as a second lieutenant. And I began what turned out to be a 28-year career that included both active and reserve tours. Over the course of those years, and even before I went into the military, of course, I grew up during the Vietnam era. Right. And that was a very troubling time for all of us. And I recall when I was a young woman, in fact, a new college student, seeing a young man who had lost both of his legs in Vietnam on campus at Florida State. And it so moved me. And in fact, one of the first poems in the book is about what I felt at that time when I met him. And it kind of, just over time, I would hear stories, even before I'd gotten in the military, I heard stories from returning vets, troubling stories about their experiences and their reactions. And then as I myself had more and more experiences in the military, I realized that a lot of these things were universal to our military members. Things like the regrets that you have when you're deployed away from home, you know, and the difficulty in readjusting when you return home. And then the whole matter of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Absolutely.
So these poems had literally been written over a period of many years. The earliest, as I say, was nearly 50 years ago. And I finally decided that I just needed to get this out. It was my life experience, but I felt that it was timely and that other veterans could relate to it. So in March, I finally gathered a lifetime of poems and took a month off and started writing the introductory remarks for each section. Right. Divided the book into sections and put the appropriate poems in each and went ahead and published it.
Is it entirely poems?
No, there's also, it's got what I would call three parts. It's got poems, it's got excerpts from letters that I wrote to my son when I was stationed overseas in Kosovo in 2001. And then it has my remarks, my reflections, which are almost memoir style. So it's interspersed throughout is poetry, and every poem has a basis of truth in it. There may be exaggerations, there's certainly fictionalized names, but in every instance, the poem was inspired by a story that I had been told or that I had experienced.
Wow. Now, did you realize that all along that you would eventually publish this, or was this something that came up later?
Well, I always wanted to get these poems out, and I think the final precipitating event was at Christmas. I received a letter from not a letter, but an email from the man who I've dedicated the book to, Master Sergeant Dale Davis. And he and I served together in Kosovo. And Dale was a Vietnam vet, a Silver Star winner, just a great guy.
Wow.
2 Purple Hearts in Vietnam. At any rate, we learned a lot from each other during that time. And I always knew that if I ever wrote anything, I dedicated to him.
Right.
Well, at Christmas, in just an exchange of Christmas greetings, I learned that he had been diagnosed with a very serious cancer in October and had been given 4 to 6 months to live.
Wow.
And I just knew I had to get this out so that Dale would at least know how much I'd always thought of him.
That's great.
I could get that dedication out.
That's important. And did he get to?
Yes, he did get, as soon as I got back, the first copy I got, I hadn't even finished proofing the thing, and I sent it to Dale, and he was in the hospital again at that time, but his wife emailed me that he had gotten the book. And then later he got home and he said he got the book, but I don't know his condition today. I just know it's very serious.
But it's good that he got to know that you were honoring him in this book. That's really important.
In fact, he took the photograph that's on the front page.
Let's talk about that. What is that?
That's me getting off of a Black Hawk helicopter and landing at Camp Bondsteel, which is the main base operating base in Kosovo, in the section that is the American sector. And we were there was one site that there were only 2 ways you could get to it. One way was to walk around a minefield, and the other was by helicopter. So this happened to be the day I had the helicopter ride there.
Good.
It was, it was very remote, and the guys that were with me were never too fond of the minefield route.
I would say there was a good reason for that.
But anyway, so that's what that picture is. That's after coming back from that trip. And there were a lot of remote sites in Kosovo. It was not just that one, but that was the most remote.
That is really neat. I didn't realize that was you in the picture. I've seen the book before, but it just didn't click that was you.
Yes.
Now, what was your job in the Army?
Well, I was a military police officer, and as such, people think, you're a cop, but it's not exactly the equivalent. You have a lot of different aspects of military police work. Could be confinement, could be physical security, and it could be law enforcement. But as time went on, and as you progress in your career, your jobs get to be more oriented toward doing the, I don't want to say staff work, but they're not usually as much in the field. This job was entirely in the field, so it was very much different than many of the later jobs I had. But when I was in Kosovo, I was what they called the force protection officer in charge.
Which means?
Well, that's sort of the latest buzzword where it encompasses all the aspects of protecting your force as much as possible. My job was to make sure that no matter where we had a single military American soldier or airman or whatever stationed in that section of Kosovo, I was to visit that site and make sure that there were as many things happening that would protect our soldiers as possible.
Wow. Now, does that put a whole lot of guilt on you if something happens to someone?
Well, I think the guilt, because I'm not, when I say I'm responsible for going out there and making sure they're doing as much as possible, I can't say I had personal guilt about the fact that there were deaths and things like that, because that happens, and you can't, you can't be at everybody's side every minute. Yeah. But on the other hand, there's a constant awareness of the danger and the feeling that you and your own team, and especially, you want to be sure everybody comes back alive. Yeah.
That sounds extremely stressful. And
it was very stressful. I could feel myself, even when I was there, I recognized that it was a life-changing experience.
Now, you mentioned that you had a son. How old was your son at this point in time?
Oh, he was grown when I went to Kosovo.
So it wasn't like you left a little child?
No, no, but he had been, there'd been other times when I had left him as a child. And there was one poem in the book, While I Was Gone, that talks about, him when he was like 9 years old and winning the end of the Little League game with a
Oh.
great hit, you know, and I wasn't there, and just all the things that happen, all the things you miss in the course of being away so much.
Now, were you away a good percentage of his life, or just occasionally?
Well, I was in the military on and off, active and reserve. After he was born, of course, I was there with him a lot, but as he got older, and I ended up getting more deployments or tours elsewhere. So the older he got, the less, not the less time I was around, but there was more times away.
Because it seems to me like that would add a lot to the, you know, the core of this book, which is dealing with what you have to deal with as you're away from home. Yeah.
Yes, it
So-
definitely does.
Now you mentioned that you have sections in this book, and I'm going to open it up. By the way, this of course is the book, and the first one is Prelude, which I'm assuming is just you're setting the stage. Yeah.
Yes.
And then Conflict. Talk to me about that part.
Well, I think that's the section that has the poems that are most graphic in terms of what is actually happening, and again, a lot of the poems are based on stuff from World War II, Vietnam vets and their stories, but I do have things even from World War II and going back. I even have one poem about World War I and one about the Civil War. I mean, the conflict is the idea of the military conflict.
And the conflict exists regardless of
Yes.
yeah.
And through time, and it's endless.
And then Return being that struggle of coming home.
Yes, yes, and there are several poems there where I talk about, you know, I think I have some, I'm not sure if I have any of the letters to my son in that section, but certainly the fact that when you return, you begin to, you know, you're a changed person.
Yes. And the family has to deal with that too.
Yes, yes. It's huge. It's a huge problem.
Because they've got this concept of who you are, and you might not be quite that same person
Exactly.
when you come back.
And you aren't that same person.
And that's hard for them as much as, and they lose the person they thought, the person that left.
Everybody loses.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Now, talk to me about the regret part.
The regret, I think, is the part where, this is where I know the poems about regretting that, you know, again, while I was gone, the things that I missed out on, just the things, the feelings that you experience, there's some people never recover from the fact that they survived and others didn't. There's one poem called The Guilty Man, and I've had so many vets tell me the same thing, that they felt guilty because they weren't maimed or killed.
I have heard people say things like that.
So, you know, those are the kinds of regrets that you have.
Wow. So, now Meltdown. Does that follow right on the heels of regret?
Yeah, that's the one that deals with PTSD and those kind of, you know, the fact that people do, in fact, need more help than, at this point, we are financially able to give them.
Right.
And I'm not trying to piggyback on top of what's just now happened with the VA. That's been in the news. But and I don't have an idea what happened there. I have no clue. But I do know that the VA is very much overworked.
Yeah.
And when you begin to have symptoms of whatever, returning nightmares, or these are psychological problems, or you have terrible physical problems that are going to continue to need care, then, you know, these are the kinds of things that require extensive treatment, and we just need to begin doing that.
And I think also in all parts of society, we have a tendency to treat the physical before we worry about the mental.
Yes, and there's still a stigma attached to that, too.
Although I think that is declining. I feel like the stigma is starting to...
It may be. I know it's very difficult in the military because that is something no soldier, or particularly no officer, wants to ever have in their record any hint of mental, you know,
because
mental,
it marks them.
Yeah.
Yes. That's sad, because the whole point of why they have it is because of their service.
Correct,
So,
but it's one of those, as they say, a catch-22.
Yeah, you're just not strong enough, so therefore this is,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, the last chapter is called Endgame, so let's talk about it.
Endgame is sort of a futuristic look at what might happen. I think I've got one poem in there about, I saw headlines one day in 2012 in October about how we may keep troops in Afghanistan until 2024. And I was just so frustrated by this, and that poem came out of that headline. There's a second poem that I called Granny's Special Box, and I kind of wrote that with my grandchildren in mind. And it is very personal, and it pertains to at some future point, a young child discovering hidden mementos from their grandmother's service.
How interesting.
And then the final one is What She Was Not, and it basically, again, is very personal, and it depicts my continual dissatisfaction with the fact that this country is staying at war, has been at war all my life, and as far as I envision at the end of this book, they will be when I die.
Just doesn't seem to go away.
No, it's endless.
That's, yeah. Well, this is very powerful and very, very pertinent to any time, but particularly to the current times. I mean, we hear so much about so much of this lately. You know, you talked about the VA issues going on, the post-traumatic stress disorder. All those things are so in the news and talked about these days, but I think this is a great personal approach to it and a way of, is it therapeutic for you?
Very much so, and as a matter of fact, I was on a trip recently to the World War II Memorial, and I gave a copy to one of the 91-year-old vet I was escorting, and he read it, and he held it up and said, every vet should read this book.
Wow, how impressive.
Yeah, he just, and it was, it's, I think that it speaks not only to my service, but more importantly, it's a universal, some universal themes and feelings that are out there that, you know, a lot of people will never discuss, but they'll see it. And that's one of my motivations and hopes, is that when people see this book, they won't just read it themselves, but they'll get it to a veteran or a family member who knows a veteran, and make sure that it gets read, because I want it to be, you know, helping others.
It helps them as much as it helps anyone else. Yeah. Now, are you speaking about this anywhere?
No, I know that I have a book signing coming up in Ashe County at the end, over the Memorial Day weekend. But yeah, that was my choice to have it then. I don't have any talks planned at this point. No. I
think that you'd be available for those, right?
Yes.
Yes. So if you are interested in this, or you know a group that would be interested in hearing more about this, and I can think of a few right off the top of my head that I likely would like to hear about you and your experiences in your book, and would include people who have history and background similar to yours, but also include people that just want to know more, you know, who don't have that experience. And sometimes it opens up a whole different world. So we appreciate you sharing this with us. And I'm so glad you came by to see me with your book.
I am too. It was wonderful that it worked out.
It did work out beautifully. Now, she had the book with her for sale the night of our second Saturday, and now it's in our gift shop. It's not an expensive book. As you can see, it's a paperback and it's relatively thin. And so therefore, her cost factor is not that high. So this is not a very expensive item for you to maybe give as a few gifts to some folks and that kind of thing. So I would encourage you to come by the Blue Ridge Art Space to our gift shop and pick up a copy. If you would like to get in touch with Lory, we can help you do that. And we thank you so much for not just all of this, but all you've done. And the service that you've given our country. You and I, thousands and thousands of other people like you.
Thank you. I just would like to add that if you purchase the book, I do intend to give half of any profits to the Fisher Foundation. The Fisher House is a equivalent of the Ronald McDonald House, but for veterans.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, for veterans' families. So if, you know, part of any profit I make, at least half of it will go toward the Fisher House.
That's good to know, and we need to put some little notes around with the books so that people will know that when they're browsing through the gift shop.
I'll get you some information on
Yeah,
Fisher House.
That would be great. That would be great. We're looking forward to having you as a part of our Arts Council family, too.
Thank you. I am, too.
She's training to be a volunteer in the gift shop, and you could be also a volunteer in the gift shop. You don't have to have an item in the gift shop to do that. You can just be someone who cares. And so we'd encourage you to check into that as well. You can find information about us in the gift shop and link over to information about Lory through our website, watauga-arts.org. Go to it for information about this and so much more.
Watauga Arts Council with your host, Cherry Johnson, serving arts in Watauga County for more than 30 years.